Alright, so today we're rebuilding the rear wheel bearings and the brakes on my Suzuki Sierra. So I'm removing the outer axle oil seal. This helps just keep the oil from coming out all over your wheel bearings and onto your brakes, which you don't want. Good quality seal puller tool is invaluable here. I think they call that part the oil seal protector. Make sure it goes in with the concave pointing towards the center of the differential. And then I just managed to push in the new oil seal by hand. I just put a little bit of oil around the outside. Help it slide in without tearing up the rubber sealing surface. Right, here I'm pressing the wheel bearing on. Make sure you have your brake backing plate on first. And then I just press the bearing on with hydraulic press. And on the underside I just had my bearing puller. Had it reversed the other way, and that gave me a nice solid surface to put even pressure on the whole bearing to push it in there, rather than putting it just on the outer race, which puts extra stress. Now I'm putting the bearing lock ring in there, so same thing, you could see that bearing remover there, it's upside down so to speak, and that way it's putting nice even pressure around the thing as I press down. And just going nice and slow until the block ring seats on the bearing. Alright, now I'm putting the axle shaft into the diff housing. Be careful of that seal as you go in. And then as you go in, you'll have to wiggle it up a little bit to get the splines on the end of the shaft to line up with your inner differential. Bit of turning, bit of wiggling, lifting it up and down, and that'll seat. Yep, there you go, you can see it just went in. Now you've just got to set your bearing, which just a slight tap on the end of the shaft with a hammer. This hammer was probably overkill, but that's seated in there. Now you get your brake backing plate and your bolts. They go through, they've got a little grooving on the edge that helps them lock into the brake backing plate, and then they slide into the actual diff housing. There's 4 holes for them, bolts on the back, tighten them down. Once I find all my nuts. There's also a little spring washer that goes behind them just to keep tension on them so they don't rattle out. Important you don't forget those, because you don't want to be losing your brake backing plate halfway down the road. On this, your brake backing plate also serves to actually hold that wheel bearing in, stop it popping out if it was to do so. Just make sure there's not too much play in those splines. Should be a little bit, but not too much. It also helps if you find the right bolts. And then 2 clicks of the elbow, tighten down. I did actually go around with the torque wrench after the video and just make sure they're all torqued right. Alright, now we get to installing the brakes. I've decided to go replace the wheel cylinder as well as the brake pads on this, just because brakes are one of those things you don't want them to not work. Alright, now I'm adding in new brake pads. Very simple, you've got to push the pin in from behind and get the brake pad to line up with the top of the wheel cylinder. They'll have a little groove on the piston that comes out. The little pin comes through, and the spring wash locker, push that in, and then you twist it so that it's the pin's 90 degrees to the groove. Here I just use a pair of multi-groups to turn the pin, and that locks in. Then you do the same with the second brake pad. At the top, that's the auto adjuster. Make sure that the little hook comes in from the back side of the adjusty bit. It sits up against the other side of the brakes. That just helps make sure that they're spread out as close to the drum as possible. Little spring goes on the side without the adjuster. A pair of long nose pliers make it really a whole lot easier putting the springs in. Down the bottom, little spring brings both brake pads together. Again, long nose pliers make it so easy to hook the spring up. And the bigger spring just goes across the top. Just try and get the brakes as kind of centered as you can, but once they're on the disc and you apply them a couple of times, they'll self-center themselves, which is pretty neat. Give the inside of your brake drum a good clean out before you go. Brake cleaner. These ones had also been machined, just because they had some rust and some gouging in them. The machining cleaned them up really well. lines up. That bolts onto the end of the axle shaft, 4 bolts come through. And it's really important when you're putting this on, you want it to go down nice and evenly, because if you get it going down too much to one side or the other, it will grab on those brake pads and there is the possibility of damaging them. So just want it to go on nice and evenly all the way around. And again, these nuts have a little spring washer on them just so your brake drum doesn't go flying off and you don't lose a wheel going down the road. Just keeps a little bit of tension on them, kind of like same idea as a nylock nut. You can see I'm going across some kind of a star pattern to pull that down nice and evenly. And then just to stop it spinning while you crank it down, just a pry bar between a couple of the lugs to keep it nice and square. Obviously this would be a whole lot easier with the differential bolted to the car because you wouldn't have the whole thing moving on you. Again, then after this, I did go through with a torque wrench. I'm just being lazy here and pulling it down the little last bit of the way with the impact gun. I don't recommend this because again it can pull it too much to one side and damage the brake pads. Or you can put too much torque on it and actually snap the lugs, which again isn't a good thing. And that's how you do your bearings and your diffs. So thanks for watching, guys. Please consider subscribing.